Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and for the first time in forever, I don't have a long, drawn-out intro for you. Well, maybe I do. I'm going to take you through my New Year's Eve. It's both my anniversary and my birthday, so my wife and I usually do something fun. Ange booked a hotel room and massages for this big day, and the massage was awesome, and when we got back to the room, my wife was tired. She had chemo a couple days before, and I kind of expected this. I knew it was going to be kind of a lackluster birthday and anniversary and New Year's because chemo takes a toll on your body. So by 6 p.m., we've canceled our dinner reservations, and we order in from the Cheesecake Factory. It was very average. And then my wife, well, she was asleep by 7 p.m. And I'm still wide awake, and it's my last night drinking before dry January starts, so I want to do something. Call it good luck or whatever, but the Jets are in town, and because of that, Olympic gold medalist snowboarder Caitlin Farrington bought her pro skier boyfriend Chris Logan tickets to the game. Chris is a diehard Jets fan, which means he's had nothing to celebrate his entire fucking life, which is very sad for Chris. But I get a text from Chris saying that he's in Seattle and we should have some drinks. And I love those two. Both are such nice and down-to-earth people, and it was cool to hang out with them. And when I get Caitlin on the podcast, you're going to be blown away by her story as it keeps adding wrinkles that are just mind-blowing. Anyway, thanks for hanging, Chris and Caitlin, and sorry about your perennial loser Jets. That has to suck. What else sucks is something that I do want to acknowledge. It's the huge loss of Ken Block. What a true visionary who really did so much for action sports. It's not often that one of the most influential behind-the-scenes players in sport is also one of the most influential athletes. But that was Ken Block, and it's a huge loss, and I feel terrible for his family, his friends, and everyone he impacted. Life is not guaranteed, no matter who you are. So remember to be a good person and tell the important people in your life that you love them, because that's important. And while that was a huge downer, I didn't run out and grab a beer to console myself. 1, because that's not my style, and 2, because I'm doing dry January. And to celebrate, I'm bringing back my beer drinking challenge. But instead of drinking 10 Barrel, I'm drinking a beer that has all of the taste and none of the alcohol to slow me down. I'm talking about my favorite non-alcoholic brew on the market. It comes from Best Day Brewing. I like the Kolsch and the IPA, and that's what I'm going to be drinking in my beer challenge tonight. And it'll be the first battle of 2023 tonight because it is Friday. So to sign up for this beer challenge, email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com, put beer challenge in the subject line, and I will get you on the list. We're going to be drinking every Friday night at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and the whole battle should take about 5 minutes. If you beat me, you're going to get a special gift from Puffin, and if I beat you, you're going to get a Powell Movement NFT, which really means I'm going to email you an image of what you could have won from Puffin, and you will be the exclusive owner of this image. I won't send it anywhere else, so you're going to be the sole proprietor of this Powell Movement Puffin NFT, which will really just be an image from my phone. So this is about as close to a competitive athlete as I get. But my guest this week thrived on competition on the biggest of stages. Grete Eliassen is a 6-time X Games medalist, a 2-time Powder Award Female Performer of the Year winner. She did it all: slope, pipe, filming, racing, everything. On part 1 of her podcast, we talk about growing up in Minnesota. We talk about moving to Norway to race, finding twin tips, and starting her meteoric rise through the ranks with a US Open win. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to please tell a friend about the show. It really does help things grow. You know what else helps the show grow? iTunes reviews, and they are so easy to do. So if you like the podcast, please take a minute and do that for me. It's appreciated. Finally, I want you to support my amazing sponsors who do make the show happen. They are Elon Skis, Puffin Drinkware, Best Day Brewing, Outdoor Research, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Stanley. Now, let's talk with Grete Eliassen. It sounds like you were just back from Canada. You were with Carl the Gnarl at Revelstoke. What was that all about?
Yeah, so I go on this annual girls trip up to Retallack Lodge with about 24 of my closest friends, all women, and we just had a blast. We go there like right before Christmas, New Year's. Again, it's just 24 of us. My really good friend, snowboarder Marie Francois, who you've had on the podcast before.
Yes.
She actually brought us all out there like 6 years ago. And we're like, we need to just do this every year. So that's kind of like our ski vacation, snowboard vacation for all of us. There's no cameras or anything besides like the GoPro, and we're just like having a good time. And it's like ski trip how we always wanted it.
Is it all people on your level of skiing and riding, you and Marie's, like badass riders?
Yeah, yes. Our boss or our queen is Annie Boulanger, who's snowboard legend, someone that I've always looked up to from a skiing standpoint, because she was one of the first women to take tricks on a snowboard and go off cliffs and like ride a snowmobile and go with the guy cruise and things like that. So all of us have like a similar riding style. We love to like go fast down through the trees. We love to hit all the poppers. We like to do tricks, even though a lot of us are in our 30s and 40s. So we're like very similar mindset, all of us. We all love POW. We love like going fast and like hitting everything we possibly can get. And in this world, there's like not that many of us at this time, right, that do this sort of thing. So it's just a really cool time for us all to get together. This year we had a few new faces, like a couple of people didn't come because I think they're just like transitioning into motherhood and like getting married and different things. So some of the OGs, they just couldn't make it because just life is happening, things are changing. But I think it's important for all of us to remember we love this and it's important to go because life is short. So you got to live your best life.
I think it's important just to have the girls trip element as well, because anytime you put guys into the mix, it totally changes the dynamic. And like, I know when there's girls trips, there's a lot more dancing and having fun and just being dumb. And when guys are there, I feel like a lot of that goes away. So it's great that you get to do that every year.
Yeah. And I would say that's really a big part of it too, is the partying part. We have a theme night every year. We've gone through rave night, hip hop, space, and then this year was goth. And Mike, I think you would have loved it. I have never dressed up as goth before in my entire life. And I always thought that was like my opposite, alter ego, because I'm pretty like butterfly happy pretty much all the time. But I was like, goth night is sexy, it's fun, but it's also like, you can just be however sad or whatever. Like you don't have to pretend you're happy all the time. You can just be you. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing trip, and you're back now. And I want to talk about not your trip, but your podcast for a couple minutes, because you have your own podcast, What's Your Line with Grete? And it comes out of a place called the Pod Mill. What's the Pod Mill all about? I'm actually not talking about your podcast. I'm talking about where you record it.
The Pod Mill is a space in Salt Lake City. It's basically just a place anyone can like, hey, I want to produce a show. Can you help me get it online? Can you help me figure out the sound stuff? I was actually introduced to the Pod Mill by a man named Tom Kelly from the US Ski and Snowboard team. He used to do Tom. A bunch of PR. Yeah. And so I was in kind of a point in my life where I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Do I want to go get like a corporate job? Do I want to just be a mom? Do I want to keep skiing? Like, what should I do? So I had a couple of drinks with Tom and he just guided me. He's like, are you into like getting into commentating, like video, podcasting? I'm like, yeah, actually, I've been listening to a bunch of these podcasts, like your podcast, The Power Movement. And then there was this podcast called Two Dope Queens, which was super entertaining. These two Black women that were just so funny, bringing on guests and having hip hop and things. And it was just really entertaining. And at this time, I was a mom living a big Cottonwood Canyon. And the only time I had to myself was driving to the store. So that's when I would like turn on a podcast and like get entertained and like get my little entertainment for the day. So I was like, yeah, I think I'd want to do a podcast. He's like, oh, you should. Like, I just spoke with these people called the Pod Mill downtown, and it's super easy. They can set you up with all the microphones, the headphones, like whatever you need. You just bring your guest in and then record. So I started doing that about 3 years ago. I think I'm going into my third or fourth seasons of What's Your Line with Grete, which is just so fun. It's such a great outlet. I love podcasting. It's so fun having these conversations. So basically they're like a turnkey, do it all. Like I just bring the guest in and then you just pay like a small fee for them to produce it. And then they put it online. That's how it works.
Do they do all the editing for you?
Yeah. So I have an amazing producer. Her name's Eliza Kitchens and she is incredible. So I literally, Mike, I just bring my guest in. I have my questions and then I say goodbye. And then Eliza does all the work, which is absolutely incredible.
Do they sell ads for you as well?
And then they sell ads. I do a lot of that too, like the outreach for commercials. I haven't done too many ads just because I have been able to keep it in the black a little bit. So I do that and they also help me with that too.
So you have to pay a fee and then they, I guess, own a piece of your podcast and they take a portion of the ads as well?
No, I own everything. All the IP is mine, but they just help me produce it. So I'm just paying a fee to get it out there to the world.
Cool.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty great and a dream that you don't have to do the editing.
That's the hardest part, at least for me. And I don't mind editing. I'm getting into it now, but it's like, I just didn't have the time. I just wanted to have the conversations and I wanted to go home to my kids and like do all that stuff. But I was super lucky to find something like that. And in all the projects that I've always done, I've always tried to find like some of the best people to help me. And then I can just do what I'm really good at and they can do what they're really good at. Right.
Yeah. It sounds like you have it figured out. And we're not here to talk about your podcast, though. We're here to talk about you on my podcast. And it all starts with you being born and raised in Minnesota. You're in the Twin Cities for the first 6 years of your life. Then you moved to Grand Marais, I think, or I don't even know how to pronounce it, which means you're almost Canadian. What is that whole place all about?
You're close. You're close. Okay, so I'm born in Minnesota. My mom's American, dad's Norwegian. We actually moved to Norway, to a town called Hemnesberget, which is up just an hour south of the Arctic Circle. It's actually where my dad still lives to this day. When I was about 4 or 5 years old for a year.
Right.
So we were up there for a year. My brother went to kindergarten there. And then we ended up going back to Excelsior, Minneapolis area, which is near Lake Minnetonka. So Lake Girl through and through. And then we moved up to Grand Marais or Lutsen, which is on Lake Superior when I was in first grade. So around the similar timing of my kids right now.
Is Grand Marais one of those places where people drive snowmobiles around in the winter for transportation and everyone knows everybody?
Yes. All the hot boys were driving snowmobiles to school. I think around like elementary school, they can start getting their license for snowmobiling. So yeah, like I couldn't drive a snowmobile to school because I lived just too far. It was like the kids that were closer to town could drive a snowmobile, but just beautiful, beautiful place. I don't know if you've ever been there. Have you been up to the North Shore on Lake Superior?
I have been to Duluth about 20 times and I've been to Two Harbors about 10.
Okay, so just go a little, like another hour and a half north, and you're going to run into Grand Marais, which is just an hour south of the Canadian border. We used to go up to Thunder Bay for like movies. There was a big swimming complex up there. Like my class would go up there in a school bus, and we'd like do field trips up in Canada. I don't think we even had to have passports, but definitely like a birth certificate. I think the teachers had to cross the border with all the kids. But we would go up there, like eat at McDonald's, all the things. But this place is just so beautiful. And I just saw this video that TGR did, and it was actually showcasing Lutsen Mountain, which is the biggest mountain in the Midwest. And it's right over Lake Superior. It's just absolutely gorgeous. So I grew up skiing there. Every single day I'd go there. I was on the high school ski team at like age 10 or 11, 5th or 6th grade. Even though I wasn't in high school, the school was so small because they're all connected. The elementary, middle school, and high school are all connected. I don't know how many kids, but less than 100 kids, I think, in my class. So I got to ski with the high school team. And this is when I met Tom Crosby. I don't know if you ever heard his name, but he was like a mogul skier and he had gone out to Whistler to go to summer camp and he had met John Smart at SMS and all that kind of stuff. And then he went back to Lutsen and he was our high school ski team coach, but he was also into this new movement of skiing backwards and like grabbing mute and stuff like that. So I had this group of high school alpine boys that I would ski with, and then this coach that was into doing the jumps, and I was always into jumping. So I just like clung on to them, and they let me follow. These like 18-year-old boys and like this 20-year-old man. I mean, this 10-year-old girl. They just like let me in because I was a good skier. I mean, it was pretty crazy. My parents were like, "Greta, what's going on?" I'm like, "No. They're the best skiers on the mountain. I need to ski with them." That was like my point.
Okay, well, before we get all the way to that point, you look at it, you're a pro skier, your brother was a pro snowboarder before he started running things at Nitro. And what about your sister? Is she an athlete as well?
Sister is so funny. She is a civil engineer and she did not fall in love with sports until college once she got her boyfriend. So she is a super athlete now, like amazing water skier, tennis player, but she tells us that she was too intimidated by my brother, Knut, and I. Like we were really good at sports at a young age. Everything from baseball to hockey to soccer, tennis. Like I have all these trophies from all these different sports because that was my thing. I loved winning trophies. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And she would go into my room and be like, I'm just not really into that. I'm going to play with dolls. So she did not get into sports at a young age, but she's super into it now. And she's like super outdoorsy chick now. Yeah, she just got intimidated by us.
How about your parents? Were they really athletic? I mean, is that how you and your brother got it?
They've always been like outdoorsy people, but they're not professional, like, oh, I got to win, competitive at all. My dad is Norwegian, and he's like this through and through Norwegian guy where he loves walking in the mountains, laying in the moss, going for big ski tours. He doesn't really love chairlifts. I would say I've heard him say that this year. He's more of like how you'd think of like a Norwegian man loving the mountains. He's more of that kind of style. Where my mom, she grew up in Minnesota at this tiny hill called Skigull, which is now called Mount Skigull, where I go in the summer. And my grandpa actually started it. It's just like a small little rope tow. He just wanted a place for the kids to learn how to ski. And my mom fell in love with it. Like, we found journals of hers when she was a little girl, and it was like, oh, it's -20 today in Minnesota, hoping to get a ride to Skigull. Hopefully Jimmy or Johnny will drive me, stuff like that. Like, she just always wanted to make it to the mountain. Yeah, so she was able to ski, but there was no high school team for her because this is before Title IX and stuff.
Okay.
She got to like ski with the high school team, and it's Brainerd, Minnesota. That's where she's from. But she wasn't able to like win any state championship or anything like that. There just wasn't any trophies or awards for women back then.
And then with sports with you, you say that you're really good at all the sports that you did. Are you the kid who's scoring all the goals in hockey and soccer? And like every parent's like, God, that girl's so good.
100%. Yeah, I was that girl that scored every single goal on the soccer team. And my dad was the coach, and he actually would like bench me. And he's like, you need to let the other girls touch the ball.
Right.
And the hockey team, I remember I made every single boy on my hockey team say the F word. And then one of the guys told his mom, and then I got in big trouble. So I was not like a bully, but I was definitely like the tough girl. I just thought I was one of the guys. That was it.
Something that I found really interesting about you is that you're afraid of heights, but you love the feeling of getting air, and you have since childhood. And when you were a kid, the way that you learned to fall in love with air was also the way that you learned how to fall down. And I know this is getting confusing, but how did you learn how to fall as a kid?
So I guess the reason why I'm scared of heights is like if I'm on top of like a building or like something where I'm not in control, that's when I'm scared, because I know the possibility of me like falling could happen. People say that if you are afraid of heights, it's because you know there's the possibility you might jump. So that's kind of why it's always in my mind, like, oh my gosh, this totally could happen. Like on chairlifts, like I get scared, right? Like I could jump, or like I could fall off this, no problem. But as a little girl, I would just climb trees all the time. And I would like jump out of trees, and I'd be like, hey, you know, we'd be out with another family, and I'd be like, hey, so-and-so's mom, check this out. And I'd like jump out of the tree just to like get a reaction, right? And then like I knew I wasn't going to hurt myself because I'd done this so many times. And then we also had this house in Lake Superior, a small cabin, and it had one of those old like fireplaces where it has the rocks on the outside, so you can like climb up the rocks to get on the roof.
Yep.
So I would do that all day long. I'd climb that, and then I'd go on top of the roof to the other side, and then I would jump off and I would roll. And without even knowing it, I was practicing the falling, right? Just like how to collapse your body and take the hit. So yeah, I've been doing that since I was maybe 3 or 4.
Which is amazing and definitely helps you out in everything that you do today. But how long can you go out and climb trees in Minnesota when it gets to be bitter cold in like October, especially how far north you are?
Right. Yeah. It got so cold in Minnesota. My accent's going to come out. It's so cold in Minnesota. Oh my goodness. Shoot. I think -30 was like pretty common. And then there's also this thing called the wind chill, where it's just your whole face or your toes, they just go totally white. So my parents were always cognizant of checking to make sure we weren't freezing and getting frostbite and stuff like that. But I loved playing outside. I never got cold. That's what my mom always said, was I never got cold. I just wore the right stuff. And in the winter, I lived on the lake, on Lake Superior, and that lake actually wouldn't freeze that often because it's so vast or big. I'm not sure. So the waves would splash on the rocks because there's these big black rocks everywhere. Not really like beach, but it's more, jaggedy rocks around. So the lake actually has huge waves. People surf it too. Huge waves that like splash onto these rocks, and then it creates like these icicles and like ice waterfall things. And I would just go out there and I would play on those and not worry about falling in the lake or anything. The lake was very comforting to me. Like it was spiritual for me. Like I would talk to the lake, and the lake would protect me, and I would shout at it when it was making big sprays and stuff like that. And yeah, I just at a young age just got very used to being outside and like playing in the elements and just not scared.
So that means that ski racing for you isn't a big deal when it's -20, -30, because you're used to it and you like being outside. And I think that all starts around age 10-ish for you. When do you realize that you actually have a real talent for racing and it almost starts getting serious?
Yeah, so around 10, I joined this team called Team Gilboa. Big team out of the cities. They're from Highland Hills. And they would come up to Lutzen, where I lived, and have Thanksgiving camp, Christmas camp, spring camp, and then they do this big race called the Spring Series up there. And like whenever they came up for camp, my parents went over and like, hey, can Greta join this camp for the week? And somehow they got me in there. They talked to this man named Neil Atkinson, and he was like the director of Team Gilboa at the time. Amazing man, did so much for all of us little racers that came out of Minnesota. And then I would just go with them 5 a.m. That's like when practice starts. It was crazy. My dad would drop me off in the Suburban and I would just walk through the woods and get on the lift and meet with the other kids. And then we would ski gates or do drills from 6 to 10. And then you'd do lunch and then you go back out again. And I already loved skiing. I'd go there no matter what. But I just saw these like kids at Lutzen skiing around with these really cool jackets that said Team Gilboa and there was like a skier on it. I'm like, that's super cool. Like, how do I become a part of that? And there was no freestyle or anything. There was no mogul comps coming through Lutzen. It was just ski racing. So I just grabbed onto that because that was what was like the best thing I saw for me to become a better skier. And I knew that's all there was. So I was like, I want to be a part of this. I want to be the best skier in the world. This is my step of doing something.
Was it something that you loved or something that you did because you were good at it and there was no other options?
Oh, great question. I loved it. I was like, how do I become the best skier in the world? And I need to join this team and I need to like do the training to figure this out. I wasn't very good right away at ski racing. I didn't really understand the whole going straight and not really feeling your ski and stuff. Like in like speed events, like Super G and downhill, you just have to have like a flat base all the time, right? Yep. And I just love the feeling of turning. You know, that's why I think I love slalom so much, was there's so much more turning. It was like more style. Yeah, I definitely was into it. And I wanted people to be like, oh yeah, Greta's the fastest. She's the best. I just wanted people to say that. And this was the way to do that. Even though I jumped a little bit too, but there was no park or anything at this time. It was just a side hit or a mogul run that I could maybe display some stuff sometimes. But it was important for me to showcase that I was one of the best skiers in the mountain.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start the year off with a new sponsor I'm really excited to tell you about, Best Day Brewing. Yeah, I love a good craft beer, but finally I found a full-flavored, full-bodied, full-aromaed craft beer without the alcohol to slow me down. Because really, life is full of moments that deserve a great beer, but not the booze. And the blind taste tests I've done prove that you won't be able to tell the difference between a Best Day and your favorite IPA or Kolsch. What I really love about Best Day is that I get a low-calorie, low-sugar brew that goes perfect with driving home. And to celebrate 2023, please join me in participating in Dry January. I'm not asking any of you to quit drinking because that's not what this is all about. I just want to see if everybody can do it for a month or even a few weeks. And if you can't, well, that's another conversation. But whether you're an athlete, a desk jockey, a biker, an entrepreneur, a runner, a walker, a hiker, a skier, a snowboarder, you deserve to have your best day yet too. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day Brewing, and if you can't find some at the store, you can always head on over to bestdaybrewing.com to get yourself a 6-pack of tasty flavor. My next sponsor is Puffin Drinkware. What's a puffin? Think a parka, a spacesuit, a life jacket for your beverage that's built with insulation technology, complete with a thermal liner for colder sips to the very last drop. Yeah, a puffin will keep your drink cold until the last drop, but it'll also make you the king or queen of whatever room or party you're in, as everyone's going to notice your puffin and start asking you questions about it. And while you're going to want to answer all of their questions about that parka or life vest or spacesuit or countless other silhouettes that Puffin creates, you and everyone else will be focused on talking about how cute your personality-infused beverage apparel is. And I want every one of you to head over to puffindrinkware.com to pick up a puffin for yourself. You need one of these. And while you're at it, buy one for a friend and have fun together. To check out the coolest and cutest drinkware in the world, head on over to puffindrinkware.com. You can thank me later. My final sponsor is Elan Skis, and I'm in love with both my Ripsticks 106 Black Edition and my Ripsticks 96 Black Edition. They are so fun and lively, all while remaining light and stable. And I'm not the only person who thinks these skis ski better than the competition. Both of these skis were named the editor's pick in Freeskier's magazine test this year. And combined, Elan won over 65 awards in 2022. Great products is why you're seeing more Elan skis on the hill. And making you a better skier is how they've been building a cult following here in the US. But what's really amazing about the brand is that they built a solar power plant on top of their state-of-the-art factory. This independence from fossil fuels, along with the new solar plant, will provide a carbon sink as powerful as 15,000 trees on an annual basis. Now, a lot of brands say that they're making a difference in the environment, but Elan is really putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to making a difference. To find out more about all things Elan, head on over to elanskis.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. There were no parks, but I'm sure your brother, being a snowboarder, he's looking for every jump on the mountain and you're following him around. Then eventually the parks do start popping up in the late 90s. Are you able to go through them and hit all the jumps, or is it snowboarders only at that point?
There was parks starting to happen around Lutsen. And my brother, Canute, he actually rented a snowboard the day before I did. And he had such a blast. He's like, Greta, this is so amazing. You got to come out and snowboard with me. So I went the next day and I rented a snowboard and I went with him on that first run, him and his friend Alex. And they were so good and they passed me by and got in the lift. And I fell off the cat track crying because I couldn't figure out how to get down the mountain on a snowboard. And that was the end of snowboarding for me because he ditched me and I just couldn't figure it out. It was so frustrating to be on a mountain and not know how to do it. That's the day I gave up snowboarding.
Well, it sounds like you like being good at things too. Like you wanted to be a pro and you like people telling you that you're doing well, and being a shitty snowboarder isn't something that you really wanted to be.
No, I see this in my son now who's 6. I'm like, oh no, if you just try a little more, you're going to get there. You're not going to be good right away. I know that now in my 30s, but when I was this young kid, I had no idea. But back to the park, there was a park and I remember there was this big sign that said, no skiers allowed. And this was after this whole snowboarding experience that I had. And I was there with my dad and he was like, Greta, why can't we just go in and you can hit these jumps? Because he knew I love to hit jumps. I'm like, no, it says no skiing allowed. That's the rule. That's the law.
You're a rule follower?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Okay.
Especially at this age. At this time, I wanted to be president one day, so I never wanted to get in trouble with the law, all these things. I wanted to have a clean rap sheet. He's like, no, you should do it. So I go in and sure enough, it's the best time of my life. I go off this jump, do a huge spread eagle. These other snowboarders that are hiking in the park are just yelling at my dad and I like, get out of here. No skiers allowed. I think they're even throwing a snowball. I'm 10. I'm very young and I'm obviously way better than them too. I'm just jumping over them, but it was still no skiers allowed. But that moment I'm like, I can do this. There was something in my mind, it doesn't really matter what other people say. I can do this. And it was cool that my dad gave me that confidence and basically bodyguard me. He was in front of me the whole way through the park, which was pretty cool.
That is pretty rad.
Yeah. So now I've joined this racing team, which I'm super proud of. I'm also on the high school team, or I'm the 5th, 6th grader just joining the high school team, basically for running the races. So I'm not in the races. So I'm already skiing and being a part of this competition thing. At this time, I think it was age 12, my parents were like, you have to decide between hockey or skiing. You can't do both.
Hockey was pretty serious for you too?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Mike, I just wanted to be a professional athlete. I'm like, how do I become this professional person in sports? And then it was any sport was it. But skiing obviously really spoke to me because I was outside all the time. I just wanted that jersey and I wanted to look cool out there and be on TV showing a sport, right? That was my dream. And I remember it being really hard. I'm like, I think I can do both. And like, no, Greta, you can't. I'm like, okay. Or maybe I think maybe I was the one. I'm like, I need to focus on skiing. I can't just do hockey and skiing. I actually think I was the one that said that to them.
Okay.
Yeah. They were like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to go to these races and I'm going to be busy. I'm going to be really busy. And sure enough, I was. But it was definitely my choice, remembering back now to my 11-year-old self.
By the time your brother's a teenager, I'm guessing that's when your folks realize that he is so good at snowboarding and you are so good at ski racing that if you two are going to be successful with those sports, it's not going to happen at whatever shit hill that you guys are based out of. Is that when the family packs everything up and heads to Lillehammer because of your skiing and your brother's snowboarding?
Yeah, it was a mixture of my parents just wanting us to have that experience of just living abroad again, like living in Norway, because my dad's Norwegian. And it was really important to them that we have that culture side of that family, get to know the family, the grandma, the aunts and uncles and cousins and all that kind of stuff. But I think them as parents, they definitely sat down and they're like, wow, Greta is obsessed with this. Canute is obsessed with this. how do we do this? We can't just move to Colorado. We're not going to move to Colorado, right? But we have this maybe opportunity to go to Lillehammer because they just had the Olympics there, right? So there's all these new facilities and different things because they had everything, all the sports. And so, yeah, we packed up a big shipping container and shipped all of our stuff to Norway, and we rented out our house. The plan was going to be to move there for 3 years just to try it out and see what happened. And then we could come back to Grand Marais. Because obviously my brother and I were really in love with our town and stuff, but we were both ready for something new because we knew there was really no future at this point in our scene. It's just too far away. Like we're 5 hours from the Twin Cities up in Grand Marais. It's too far.
And that's such an incredible sacrifice for the whole family to make. Do your parents have to find new jobs, or are you guys like a wealthy family where you're able to just do this and not worry about it? Or how does that all work out? Because when you pack up and leave to another country, hopefully you're able to transfer your job, but that's not always the case.
Yeah. So my mom, she's worked from home. She's had a home office my entire life, where at one point she was like at some office and then she would go on like these work trips. She actually worked in trucking. So she would sell like a fuel card to truckers. So she would go travel and go meet with different trucking companies and like hopefully they'd buy the fuel card. And then that's how she'd make money through sales, right? Lots of logistic transportation stuff. So she would always be in her, we call it the HQ, her headquarters at home. And she'd always be on the phone making deals and talking. And she also had like a glass window door. So we always knew when mom was on the phone, like it was business and we weren't allowed to make a lot of noise and stuff.
Sure.
When we moved, she was actually able to keep her job and she brought it over to Norway. And then she opened up this random trucking logistics business in France. So that's how that all worked. My mom is the one that totally figured that out. My dad, he's a builder, does construction. So he started a business when he got there to build like traditional Norwegian log homes.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you move there, is it total culture shock to you? Do you speak the language? Like, how does that all work out?
It was total culture shock. I'm 13 years old, totally insecure. I have this skiing thing. I know I'm really good at sports and I'm really good at climbing trees and jumping out of them. I have this confidence, but as far as teenage confidence, I had none. All the girls were like smoking cigarettes and getting drunk. And I was like, this is crazy. I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is just so wild. Miss 60 was the jeans, like these super tight jeans. And then they were called buffalo shoes, were like high platform shoes. This was like the style then. It was like total culture shock. Even though we moved to this town, Lillehammer, which is actually pretty big. It was way bigger than Grand Marais. It had like 26,000 people and Grand Marais had like 1,000.
Right.
So it was definitely like a new shock and just meeting new people and stuff. And they didn't know anything about me. It wasn't until the first school ski day that I actually like felt at home there. We did a random like school big air at Hafjell. They used to have the X Games there, Hafjell.
Okay.
It's just up the road. So that's like the local resort. And yeah, we called it the big jump. It wasn't big air, it was big jump. And we had a big jump contest. And I remember the whole school got to see me do a tail grab and then a 360 on this big jump. And I just thought I was the shit.
You've arrived.
Yeah, I've arrived. But I think that was like a year. And it wasn't until winter that happened. But yeah, moving to school, I didn't know the language that well. I remember they asked me to write like a sentence and I couldn't even write a sentence in Norwegian. I was in a Norwegian class, but then I would go to a special class for learning Norwegian because there was a kid from Germany. There were some refugee kids from Pakistan. There was a girl from Somalia. So we were like learning Norwegian from the start. And that took about 3 months for all of us until we got into the regular Norwegian class. And then I was just there. I took every single class in Norwegian. I would say 2 years fully to be fluent, speaking with my friends and stuff in Norwegian. But they were also really good at English because in Norway, they start taking English classes, I think around grade 6 or something, or maybe earlier, grade 4.
They're way smarter than us over there.
Not smarter, but it's just different. It's just different. Yeah.
It's like all of them can speak like 4 languages and they just seem to have a much better worldview than at least what I had. And that was with me traveling with Norwegian athletes when I was like 15 years older than them. And I was feeling like, Jesus, these guys are way smarter than me.
Yeah, and that's what my parents really wanted too. Besides just the skiing and the snowboarding for my brother, they wanted us to have that overall picture of the world, that it's not just America, even though I love the United States, like it's amazing and there's so much there, but there's more. I feel like the only way to really get that experience is living abroad and getting friends from different countries and things like that.
And when you think about it, you really lived abroad and did it on your own, because I think by the time you're 15 is when you go to one of those, I don't know if it's a sports school or I don't know what it's called, but it's like what would be considered a ski academy here in the US. You do that at 15 there. And that's crazy to me, because it's like your parents are giving you up and making you a college freshman automatically at 15, where you've got your own apartment and you're worrying about, I don't know if you're worrying about bills, but cooking your own food, getting your own meals, doing your own shit, and it's all on you for the first time at 15. Is that scary?
Oh, totally. It's called skigymnas. It's like a ski school, basically. So in Norway, we don't have school sports. There's no like football team or volleyball team, stuff like that. So when you play sports growing up, you do it at like a club level. So like after school. I think that's so strange, actually, how the US is so based on sports and schools and cheerleaders and all these things, where in Norway, it's just academics. And then after school, that's when you do your sport. So at age 15, it's before you go to high school. At 15, you have to choose what you want to do in life. They give you that chance. It's like, do you want to go to school to go to university? Do you want to go to school to be a doctor? Do you want to be a tattoo artist? Do you like music? Do you like skiing? So at 15, you have to choose what you want to do. So you have to apply to go to these schools and stuff. And I applied to go to Oppdal videregående skole, which is an amazing school 3 hours north of Lillehammer. And this time I'm on the Norwegian national team, the junior team for ski racing. So I had just won the national title in slalom. I'd just been to Whistler, to the Whistler Cup, my first international race. And then we're going into FIS this coming year. So FIS is age 15 is when you start racing FIS. And then, you have to go to a special school. And I went to this school because Axel Windell, the skier, Axel, he was there. And my coach at the time, I can't even remember his name. Oh, what was his name? Anyways, he was living there. So my friend Lena Lörseth and I, we were the top women of the 1986 teams. And we both went to this school, and then we would travel with the national team. So basically for her and I, it was just like a place to put our stuff. And then we were on the road, like in the team van, going down to the Alps every other month, if not like the whole time, ski racing.
Before you start traveling every weekend and everything. I've heard a ton about US ski academies. And what's the life like of a ski academy in Norway? I mean, are you on the hill 5 hours a day and then schooling later on? Or how does that whole thing work out?
Yeah, it's different from the private academies in the US because it's not private, it's a public school. So our school, we just had like a class, like a ski class or an athlete class. There was some curlers, and then there was like a snowboard person, and then there was just ski racing. And we all get our own little apartments. They're called a hybel, and it's like a suite, like inside someone's house. And then you have to go to the store and get all your own food. You have to make all your own meals. You have to get to school on time. I guess there's a little bit of partying too because you're on your own, but it's like there's so much going on. You can't even think about partying because how are you going to get your groceries? How are you going to get to school? Like there's just so much going on. It just wasn't enough time to party. It's not like college. It's more like, okay, I have got to figure this out. I need to learn how to vacuum. I need to learn how to clean my bathroom, like domestic stuff. It's more like that. And it's different where you actually get a little stipend from the Norwegian bank or whatever too for your rent and stuff for school. So it wasn't my parents putting all this money into me going to college. This was just like, no, she wants to ski and go to school at the same time. So she has to go to the school. She got in, and then you actually get money to like pay for your rent and stuff and all that because it's just part of the culture there, which is nice. It's very expensive, but once you're in the system, it makes sense.
And then in terms of the training, how often are you on the hill? And is there any time to free ski at all? Or is everything pretty regimented? Like we are going to make her a great skier.
Yeah, I was starting to free ski before this. Like I was going in the park after ski races and stuff with my good group of guy friends at Hafjell, Lars Vane, Henrik and Håkon and Knut Bjartnes, a few others. But when I moved up to Oppdal, it was like a decision, like I'm going to be a ski racer. That was the deal. Even though right when I got there, I remember the free ski guys there at the mountain, they actually showed up at my first training. They're like, hey, Greta, welcome to Oppdal. Heard you're a pretty good skier. Like this kind of thing, like with their car. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, but I'm a ski racer. Everyone was trying to make me quit ski racing. I swear that I met because they knew I had this other thing that I like to do. And I'm like, no, I'm focused. Like I'm going to do this thing. So there wasn't much time. And that's kind of where I realized what I was doing wasn't what I loved. Right when I moved there, I remember like it was starting to fester in my brain. What if I quit ski racing? What if?
I mean, I feel like when you go there, like for the first 2 years, you're racing almost every weekend. In the winter, you're traveling all over the world. When you look at your life in times, it's like, did you have a normal childhood at all? Or is it more like you were a pro skier living on your own from the time you were a teenager?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. Normal childhood. Like I went to like the winter dance and we had like a Christmas dance. Those things were like super important to me. So I always made time for that. But because I was at this special school and I had this class, we were all doing it together. So it was kind of like we were doing our own high school experience together. But I mean, I don't know. I watched a lot of TV at this time too, because I was always tired after skiing. Then you come home and I'd watch Beverly Hills 90210, The Hills, The OC, like all those shows. I was pretty obsessed with American culture and how that whole locker room talk, or when they're in the hallway and they're talking at their lockers and stuff. I never had that. Like I thought that'd be really cool, like make out with your boyfriend in the hallway. Never had that experience. That kind of stuff, like the romances and things, I think that would have been really cool. But did that even really happen, or was that just on TV?
No, it totally happened. You just missed it all. But you were busy being a pro skier.
Dang it. Yeah.
It's time for my final sponsor break, and I'm going to start this one off with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Peter Glenn has been the one-stop shop for all your ski needs since 1958, and all your snowboard needs since the sport started. And they are all about getting you out on the mountain. Peter Glenn's staff is super knowledgeable and will help you get into the right gear if you're at one of their many locations. But I get it. Not everyone's going to be able to make it to one of their retail establishments, but you can still have a great shopping experience online over at peterglenn.com. The site has all the brands, all the products, and they offer free shipping on orders of $49 or more, a no-hassle return policy, and they'll price match any reputable shop on the web. So if you find a product somewhere else, head on over to Peter Glenn, and if you can't find it cheaper there, they will price match that product that you found somewhere else so you can still support me. On top of that, Peter Glenn supports cool things in snow like this podcast, Johnny Mosley, and many more things. So please support the brand that supports me and check out Peter Glenn before you buy anywhere else. My next sponsor is Stanley, an iconic Seattle brand that has been ahead of the curve since 1913. While we all know Stanley for creating that timeless green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long, they still do that and a whole lot more these days. They're still all about adventure, they're still all about keeping your beverages hotter or colder than any other product ever created, and they've always been the right choice when it comes to the planet. If you're still using single-use plastics for your beverages, it's time to make a change for the environment. And I'm making it easier than ever to do. I'm going to save you 30% on all products from Stanley when you head on over to stanley1913.com, buy some stuff. I highly recommend the water bottle and a set of pint glasses. And when you check out, enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase, and you'll save that 30%. My final sponsor is Outdoor Research. They've been building award-winning outerwear and gear in rainy Seattle since 1981. So for 40 years, badasses in the mountains have trusted OR gear to be the highest quality, most functional outerwear on the planet. What's exciting is that these days, the gear is still the best. You cannot compare to the quality of Outdoor Research. But when you head on over to outdoorresearch.com right now, you're going to notice some major differences. While they still make the badass technical gear you trust, they're branching out and they've hired some new designers who have their fingers on the pulse of the market to create new fits, cuts, styles, and colorways. And whether you ski or snowboard or spend your time in the park or the backcountry or the resort, Outdoor Research has something for you. And there's so much new stuff. I'm stoked because on top of their outerwear, their streetwear looks so good too. I want you to wear it all, and I'm going to make it really easy for you to do that because I'm going to save you 25% off all non-sale items over at outdoorresearch.com. And know that this code I'm about to give you, you won't be able to use it on OR Pro products, which is their military stuff. But everything else is game, and you get 25% off the best outerwear on the planet. If you've been out in the terrible conditions in OR gear, you know what I'm talking about. So when you check out at outdoorresearch.com, you're going to enter the code POWEL25. That's all capitals for Powell, the number 25, and there's no spaces in that, and you will save your 25%. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. One thing I do look at when I do these podcasts is race results because I'm always blown away by how rare it is for a racer to be consistently good. Looking at your results over the years, you have like 7 podiums in maybe 100 or so races or a lot of races. Is it disappointment every other weekend? Does that get to your head?
You didn't find that result where I beat Lindsay Vonn in Super G and in slalom. Those are pretty awesome stats.
Those are amazing stats, but I'm saying there was 7 podiums in like 100 races. So
oh, yeah.
If 7% of the time you're doing well, I would think that 93% of the time you're bummed.
I know, but I like never won. I was never like on top. But I just always thought that I was going to get, it just wasn't my time yet. Something was going to click and I was going to fall in love with the racing part, but I just didn't really care. I just love skiing so much. Again, I love the feeling of turning around the gates and getting better. And I didn't know what was fast or what was not fast when I was skiing. I just knew that I'm like, did I enjoy that or did I not enjoy that? And if I typically enjoyed it, it was fast. But if I didn't, it was slow. And I know I was really competitive when I was super young with the trophies and stuff, but I knew my time was going to come. I just didn't know when. I was not bummed. Like my friend Lena, she was always getting the first places. And I was like, that's cool. But I'm like, she doesn't go off jumps. That's fine. It's like, I'm better in this other thing that she doesn't do.
So you never left races in a bad mood. It was always like, oh, that was the race.
Totally. It wasn't until maybe if a coach said something like, hey, you got to try harder. But they knew I was trying. I was trying my hardest and every single time I did it. So no, never.
And then with slopestyle, every course is a little bit different. And I'm sure they're a little different in racing too. But does the whole sport feel like Groundhog Day for you? Like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again?
The same thing over and over again. And it was always dark and the snow was always so hard and it was cold. Like my feet are okay now, but like in ski racing, you have to use these ski boots that are called plug boots that are like the tightest, hardest boots that you could ever imagine. Like you're crying every time you put them on, but you have to put them on because that's how you get the correct, I guess, feeling on your toes and stuff when you're skiing down. But it was just insane. And then you have -20 temperatures and then you're out there at 5 a.m, literally smashing gates. And then the gate smashes you back because it's hitting ice and then coming back up and then hits your butt. It didn't feel good. And again, I'm all about feel. And then something wasn't clicking. I didn't know what it was, but something was pestering me. And I'm like, okay, this isn't it. But what is my thing? If I love to ski, but it can't be this, what is it? So I was trying to figure that out.
Well, with race, you made it to the Europa Cup, which I think is like the level down from the World Cup. And at your age, that means you're absolutely killing it. And as you develop, you probably get even better at racing. And who knows how far you could have gone. But the big names you were racing against, you said Lindsay Kildo, who became Lindsay Vonn. Who else is out there against you?
Julia Mancuso. Gosh, this is so long now. Shemi Alcott from Great Britain. Lauren Ross, who's now like a pretty famous photographer. Kaylin Richardson. Shelley Glover, who actually passed away. She was another really good friend of mine who grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. And she would come up to Lutsen to ski race with Team Gilboa like I did from Grand Marais. And she actually died at Mount Bachelor skiing GS, like something very simple, not a speed event or anything, and just hit her head and ended up dying in the helicopter on the way to the hospital. But Shelley Glover, she was a really big prominent one too. Mainly Julia Mancuso and Lindsay Vonn were the main ones that are still prevalent now. Like I was right there with them, but I didn't have the same drive. I can't explain it. I just didn't care as much as they did.
Were you there the day that Shelley fell at Bachelor?
So I was living in Norway at the time, and she was on the U.S. ski team. So she was training with the team at Bachelor. I think it was like a spring camp. But this was after I had switched to freeskiing. So I just told my coach, I'm done. And I went and did this like big air for Armada and stuff. And then I got invited to go to Super Park. Super Park was at Mount Bachelor that year. I'm getting ahead of us, but like Powder Magazine used to put on this event called Super Park.
Yeah.
And I got invited to go, but she had passed, I want to say like maybe a month before that there on the mountain. So that was really hard for me. Life is just weird. It's just weird sometimes. It's just like, okay, what does this mean? Like, why did my friend just die here? And now I'm going to go here and do this event and get these really big jumps and things. But, oh, life is so morbid, Mike. It's been a hard year. My dad's girlfriend actually just passed away.
Sorry.
So I was a big follower of Twitch, that DJ on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and his wife, Allison, with all the dances and stuff. And now with Ken Block just recently, 2 days ago. It's just like, what?
Yeah.
The life has lots of downs, but it has so many ups too. And it's just like trying to find that balance of what it is. And at that young age, I was, I'm 15, 16 at that young age, just like dealing with that type of emotion and skiing and all the things. And again, she passed in like a very mellow type of a fall too, but just to the head and stuff. So that's how I've always been a big helmet wearer all the time.
All right. Well, we're going to get off the sad subject and go to the
Yeah,
highlights of your race career. What are your highlights?
Definitely winning the slalom title at the national championships, the junior championships, because that got me on the Norwegian team. Winning junior worlds was pretty fun in the Super G for junior twos. And then getting the bronze medal at the Junior Olympics in Slovenia with my girlfriend, Lena Lurseth, who's not really my girlfriend, but my friend. But we made out on the podium just for like popularity for the night, which was pretty cool.
And I'm sure you turned a ton of heads right there.
Always looking for that reaction.
Yeah, I could see it getting it right there.
Oh, you two are the Norwegian girls that kissed on the podium.
Yeah, that's all you have to say.
Yeah.
But during this whole time that you were a racer, you're also aware of everything that's going on with the new school segment of skiing. And what are the videos of the time that you remember wearing out the VHS tapes of?
Tom Crosby from Lutzen, who had gone to Smart Mogul skiing in Whistler, big inspiration for me. He had a movie called Degenerates.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I was like, oh, they're grabbing their skis. This is really, really cool. And then when I moved to Norway, I was still interested in this. But again, I moved to this new place. I didn't really know if people were into this type of skiing, the new school skiing. I knew people ski race, but I didn't know they like to go backwards and stuff like that. So I ordered 2 movies online. This was back when I had to ask my mom for her credit card and be like, hey, can I order these movies? Oh, I had a subscription to Freeze magazine back in Minnesota. It was like in Powder. There was an ad for Freeze. My mom signed up for it and she's like, I think you'd like this magazine. So in Freeze, I was able to read all that kind of stuff. And there was just movies about poor boys. So I went on to poorboys.com and I ordered The Game. And that was my first VHS. And then also this movie called Parental Advisory from Whistler here.
The Heavy Hitting Films?
Heavy Hitting Films. Exactly. Yeah, that one. And it was like you buy The Game and then I think you got Heavy Hitting Films for free or like for a discount, whatever it was. So I had those 2 movies and I would tune my skis in the garage and I'd have like this little television with a VHS player in it. And I would just play those movies all the time and watch while I was tuning my skis. And I think that's when I first saw tidbits of Sarah and Christy. They just have these 20-second clips, which were awesome. But I loved watching Falou Poirier. I just loved anything that was hip hop. And I loved all the 3 fills. I thought they were really cool. Yeah, that's how I got into just watching people slide rails and figuring out the tricks.
And is this around the time that you're begging your parents to send you to the glacier to one of the Whistler camps? You're like, I need to go here. And eventually they give in and send you to the glacier?
Yep. So I was watching these videos and then this was around the time that New Schoolers started. And I don't know how I found New Schoolers. I want to say I just like randomly put it in the URL and then just signed up. I was a very early person on New Schoolers. I was there back when they had this thing called the Skier Stock Exchange, which was this fun game you'd play with these random people online that also maybe had twin tips. Yeah, I spent a lot of time on New Schoolers. And then I saw this camp, maybe there was like an ad that popped up, but then I also saw in the movie, like that's where they were. I could see they were at the glacier. And then my friend Tom, the coach from Minnesota, I knew he went there once. And I think maybe I was like emailing him about it. I'm like, hey, how do I go there and figure this out? And he's like, yeah, this is who you'd contact, blah, blah, blah. And I remember trying to apply for one of the scholarships because they were like giving a session away. But I was probably so far in Norway that they're like, there's no way this chick's going to be able to make it because I didn't win it. But 2 years of asking, I finally got the chance to go to Whistler, to the glacier.
What's it like when you get to meet your heroes there? Because if you're watching all these videos, you see all these faces. They are all at camp in the summertime, given some might be at Hood. But at that point, everyone was going to Whistler, it seemed like. And every skier that you saw in those movies and every skier that if you put any pictures on the wall, they were at that camp. They were probably coaching you at some point. Were you starstruck at all?
I was starstruck. I remember we came back to the States for the summer to go to Minnesota to the summer cabin where my mom is from and my grandma is. So it was just like I would take a flight from Minnesota to go to camp. But I remember landing at the Vancouver airport and just being like, whoa, like Yannick B was there. There was this guy named Andre who was like sponsored by Red Bull. He had a Red Bull hat on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, who's this guy? And then when you first get to camp, they have this like, hey, welcome to camp, like in the conference room. And then I remember seeing Sarah when she walked in the door and just being floored. Like I couldn't even talk. Couldn't even talk because it was like, this goddess woman is here. Like, this is absolutely incredible. And I didn't get a chance to talk to her because she just, goes up, says her thing, and then they go out and do their thing. But it was total starstruck and trying to figure out what to say on the T-bar every time you go up with one of the coaches or something. It was just amazing to see it all.
Progression-wise, that place was the hub for learning new tricks, and it was the hub for all the pros, and all the diggers were going to be the next generation of pros, it seemed like, because that was where the industry was in the summer. Do you go to that place knowing 360s and leave with like a whole bag of tricks?
Yep, I went there and I slid a wooden rail in my friend's yard. We do that where it's kind of like jump on, jump off. It wasn't like a real slide. So I hadn't slid PVC or any type of metal yet. And then for jumps, I remembered being able to do a 360, like just kind of like no grab or anything, just a 360. But by the end of the camp, I was doing 540s. I was doing 270s off the PVC pipes. I didn't learn a backflip yet, even though that was kind of like my goal. But I did do a backflip, and they have water ramps too at Whistler. So like we were able to water ramp one day, and then I think it was just bad weather, so they didn't want us to do the backflips on snow that next day. But yeah, I learned how to do a backflip at camp on a trampoline and on a water ramp. It was like everything and more. And then also Mike Douglas was there. That was the big name. Mike Douglas was a coach too. And he said, yeah, Greta, you could become pro if you wanted to, because he was sponsored by Solomon at the time. And Sarah was too. And he's like, you just have to come to the US Open, and that's where I learned about the US Open. Even though I knew about it, I was like, okay, maybe I should go there one day, because I was still ski racing at the time. I'm just going to go back and ski race, and we'll see what happens.
I'm guessing at camp, that week's where everything clicks with your skiing. You learn all these tricks. You get connected to a lot of different people. I think Falou is one who kind of connects you with Oakley. Is that how that relationship starts to develop?
Yep, exactly. So I win the camp. We have like a contest the last day,
Yep.
And I won the camp day. And then at the barbecue where we have pizza down by the lake, he introduced me to a man named Sebastian Paradis. And he went on to Red Bull later. And he gave me Sebastian's card. And then I actually met Greg Strokes too in the village at the bottom of one of the downhill races for mountain biking. That's where I made my connection with Oakley.
And Greg Strokes, he's been with Oakley forever. He's a guy I want to have on the show, but that's not really his style, although I keep harassing him to do it. But he's maybe the most important team manager of all time in snow, it seems like. And it's a small world. He grew up a few miles from me. But who is Strokes, and why is he so important to skiing?
Yeah, Greg Strokes has been the athlete manager, team manager for Ski Oakley since before my time. Like, he was the guy that put on session 1242, signed Tanner, signed Pep, Seth. He's still the guy I email if I need goggles, which is pretty incredible. So it's pretty fun. Yeah, and he gave me my first sponsorship at age 15. He sent me a bunch of goggles and the whole outerwear kit and all the things. I just quit ski racing, and I made it over to Åre, Sweden, where Nilsson's from, or that's where he skis, and he would put on this event called the Red Bull Big Air.
Okay.
And I wasn't invited, but I convinced my dad again to go drive up there, pick me up from Oakdale from high school, and then we'll go over here and hopefully we'll meet the right people, and then they'll let me hit the jump. That was kind of the plan. They didn't let me hit the jump, which is fine. But I met Greg there, and then that's how I met Armada. Chris O'Connell was at that event in a ski shop. It's just like me being super proactive, going to the right places, talking to the right people, and then pitching myself. Literally, that's my career.
So you have to be absolutely blown away. I mean, with Oakley, it's like a team of Seth, Pep, Tanner. Armada's like Tanner, JP. There are so many different A-list athletes. What's going through your mind as a 15, 16-year-old being put on these brands?
I made it. I'm living my best life. There is nothing greater than this moment. I was so happy, so happy. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to tell my parents, yes, I met these people. They're giving me free stuff. And then maybe eventually we'll have a contract or something. And I remember Mike Douglas back to camp. He was like, Sarah's making, I think he told me, he's like, Sarah's making $100,000. I was like, what? So I would tell my mom, Sarah's making $100,000. I can make a career doing this. It's totally a career path. Let's make this happen. There was no doubt in my mind.
So when you come back to Norway and you quit ski racing and you've got all these things in place and you do this Red Bull Big Air, are you skiing with the great Norwegian skiers of the time, like the PKs and the Andres Hatviets? Are you skiing with those dudes?
Yeah. So now I got my connection with Oakley and Armada. So I'm like the Norwegian skier girl that has these two really prominent sponsors in New School, right? So they're like, everyone kind of knows who I am because I have these connections with these businesses. And I'm going to these different events like the Red Bull Big Air. There was also this big event every spring up in Ora called Ora Freeride Week, where they'd build a bunch of jumps and things, and everyone from Scandinavia would go and hit these things. It was pretty cool. And then they would also have like random big airs around places. And we had a city big air in Oslo once. Julian Rainier won it. So it was just like, in my world, like big name celebrities. Like I'm so invested in this sport of skiing. Like I don't even know anything about any other celebrities. Every single guy in skiing to me is like a superstar, right? So I know the whole story, all the things. So I don't know how else to explain it. It was just like, we were talking about ski racing before, like how I knew I was supposed to be there, but it wasn't my thing. This was my thing. And every day it got better and better. And at this time, there was a few of us that were in the scene that had sponsors, and it was myself and then Lars Vane. And I don't want to jump over him because he was really big for me. He was my really good friend from Hafjell, who I ski raced with. And then he actually quit ski racing 3 years prior to me quitting ski racing to just focus on free ski full time. And he actually won the freestyle CH, the big air down in Switzerland with like a Switch 1440 bio or something, like way before. This is a long time ago. So he was around, and he was sponsored by Vocal. And then Andreas Hopfight was coming around, and he was a little after Lars because Andreas was just in his small town in, Goul or Yailo. He was in like the West Coast. So we're kind of like spread apart. I'm way up in Uppdal, which is a little north, and Lars is down in Lillehammer, and then Andreas is on the West Coast. And because the roads are so windy and stuff, and none of us have our driver's license, it's hard to see each other. So we only see each other at like these random events. But yeah, there's a lot of names coming out. And then we're just trying to figure out, like, how can we all get to America? How do we get to the US Open? That was all of our goals. How do we get to the US Open and maybe X Games? We just wanted to figure out how to get to Vail.
You need to get to Vail, and there's slope and pipe in Vail waiting for you. But in thinking about the jumps and the pipe in Norway that you're training on, do you have legit jumps in a pipe, or is it something that you just have to figure out when you get to those big events?
No, it's just something you got to figure out. I was lucky where I actually got to go to Windell's. So because of my connection between Oakley and Armada, I got to go to camp as like a free camper for like 2 sessions. That's where I would go learn the stuff. I'd go ski that half pipe at Mount Hood, and then I'd slide rails and hit jumps. And Sage Catabriga Aloso was my coach one year. And that's where I'd learn the skills, was summer camp at Mount Hood.
So that first US Open, you say everybody's trying to get themselves to the States for the US Open because it is the biggest contest in the world, it seems like, at that point. And when you come to the US Open in 2004, while people do know you from a rip curl event that you did, that you won, and some of these other events that we talked about, do you kind of come into that US Open as an unknown in the industry, and you show up and it's 10 million kids trying to make a name for themselves?
Yeah, I was definitely still an unknown. Part of the deal I remember with Armada was they have to help me get to these events. So it was like I wasn't getting paid any money, but they were going to pay for my flight and like my lodging and food to go compete at these events. And then my deal with Oakley was they were going to buy me the plane ticket to get to Denver. So that was part of my deal with Oakley, living in Norway, the international flight to get over. And then they always had like a place to stay and did food and stuff. So I just had to get there.
Okay.
But yeah, I went there. And I was unknown, but again, I'm like, this is my thing, and I know I can win this. Like, there was like no doubt in my mind. Just even though it was like crazy conditions. Like, I don't know if you remember these jumps, but like they had like the 70-foot booter step down at the bottom for like the last jump.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even let us hit it until like the final. Like they're like, okay, you didn't even get a practice. It's like, okay, no, that jump's part of the final now, and you just have to send it. So it was like a lot of me just being confident. Like, yes, I'm a really good skier. I can do this. Just don't let this stuff get in your head and just do you, and you'll be successful. But that first year, I remember we had qualifying, and that went great. They opened that jump. I'm like, okay, let's do that jump. That's fine. That works. I like this airtime. And then it was going to be a little while until our final run, like a couple hours later. And I ended up like, I wanted to just keep skiing. I didn't want to stop skiing. That's why I quit ski racing, because in ski racing, we'd warm up, do some gates in the morning, and then you inspect, and then you sit in the lodge and just like rest and play cards for it to get ready for your run. And then you do the run, and then you inspect, and then you sit back in the lodge and you rest. And I'm like, this isn't what I want to do. I want to ski. So at this event, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go check out the upper part of Vail and like ski some moguls and see what this mountain has to offer. Like, this is awesome. I get to be here on a ski trip. This is great. And I end up basically missing the finals. So we literally like pull up right at the start gate and they're like, no, Greta, like we're already running the men. I'm like, what? And I had just qualified for the finals. I'm like, I missed it. Like, I couldn't believe it, but I was having so much fun. So it kind of made sense, like in how my life works. But somehow they let me go. They're like, okay, you can take one run. And I took my run and I ended up winning. It was so bizarre how all that happened. Yeah, I won. And that's when I knew it was on and I was here to stay.
And that's the event that can make you famous in a weekend if you do well. And you win the contest. And I'm not sure if you were getting paid from anybody at this point other than getting like your Oakley flights and your Armada flights. But is this when people start paying you like, holy shit, this girl is the next thing in skiing?
I don't think I got any big contract after that, but it was like I got a big check from the US Open from Freeze, which was awesome. It was like $2,500, which is great. I was excited. And I knew that this was just going to help me get into the videos and lead into my career that I've always wanted, which is to be like this person in the magazine skiing and doing these tricks. I think it did lead into, okay, she can go film with Poor Boys this year because of that. I think that's when that started.
And you are, I think I said it in the beginning, like an OG where it was slope, pipe, and filming at all times, it seemed like, for athletes back then. Do you think it's weird now with all the specialization that's going on and there's a guy that's just focused on slope or there's a guy that's just focused on pipe and they might not be filming? Where back then it was like you were going to do all that and then you'd see everybody in the bar at night?
Yeah, that was the best time. Mike, I think it's so weird now. That's why it was so important for me to get back involved with the sport, was to like showcase, like, this is fun. This is supposed to be about fun, making fun videos and showcasing cool skiing, not just going down a half pipe or icy half pipe over and over again. See, I think it's super weird. And I know the young kids do too. I went to camp this summer and they're all like, it's so weird. Like, your time was the best. I'm like, I know, I'm sorry, but you guys can bring it back. Just make sure you're pushing for the stuff that you like to do. That's what's important.
Well, I feel like there were always athletes in the game. Back then, it was like there were some athletes and some skiers, and now it's all athletes.
Oh, right. And you probably, as like a team manager, were able to see it more, where I was kind of like so laser focused, right? I didn't look at much at the others, where I was just like, am I having a good time? Okay, good. Now that I think about it, for me, like as a skier, all the other things were so much more important. Your overall image was than just one contest.
It's a lifestyle, and being great in contests is part of that lifestyle, but having video parts was part of that lifestyle as well. You didn't have to be great in contests if you were going to put out a video part, and if you're going to put out a video part, you could live the party and cloud of smoke life and still put out a video part that's better than anybody else's, so it didn't matter.
Right, and during this time, I was on Oakley, so Tanner Hall was around a bunch, so I saw that whole sea crew thing and all this stuff. And like, I remember even driving from the US Open. We just had the US Open and there was a break until the X Games. So Oakley again helped us find a lodging and somewhere to stay. And I think C.R. Johnson was just able to hang because he was making a movie with Tanner. And I remember driving from, I think it was Beaver Creek to Breckenridge one day, or Keystone, to go do some park. And they were just hotboxing with their friend E-Rock, you know, like in an Escalade. I'm in the way back seat, just like, what is happening? Like, I don't even smoke weed, but I'm just like, this is crazy. And they're listening to hip hop and the rap. Like, I was in heaven. I just thought that was the coolest part, to be like in the car with the guys.
And just knowing that they don't look like they're being athletes, just smoking weed all the time. But what Tanner put on film was so incredible that you couldn't question what he was doing when he wasn't skiing.
Yeah. And one of my favorite skiers is Mickael Deschenaux. And I got to travel a bunch with him too. And very similar. Like, he always surprised me. Like, I was like, forgot, Mickael, you're the best skier in the world. I would like forget because he wouldn't do anything for like the longest time. 2 weeks, no skiing. Then boom, switch 1080. Perfect. I'm like, how did that happen?
I would say the difference between him and Tanner, though, is that Tanner never took those 2 weeks off. Tanner was on the exercise bike at 5 a.m, getting ready to go ski, where Nick was just pure talent. And whenever he decided to do something, everybody's jaw dropped.
Yeah. And Tanner, I mean, he needed the weed too, because he was so ADD, like always moving. He still is, like always moving and all the things. And needed to chill out. And the skiing did that for him, which was great.
Well, I was going to talk more about sponsorship and a bunch of other things, but we haven't even gotten to really any of your career yet. in terms of like the big contests or anything like that. So first and foremost, I want to see if it's okay if we do a part 2 and you and I connect maybe in the next couple days or next week and record part 2 and put that out so we can really tell your life and times.
That would be wonderful. I'm going on a little cabin trip this weekend, so we can't do it this weekend, but early next week, I'm back, and I cannot wait to spill all the details and all the things because I saw a lot. So bring the questions. I'd love to answer them.
I will. But at this point, I have a segment of the show called Inappropriate Questions. This is where I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. I was able to get a former guest on the podcast and one of your best friends to ask the questions. Unfortunately, she was with you up at Retallack, and she wasn't able to get on the phone with me and record them, so she sent them to me via text. She's a French-Canadian snowboarder that's also an activist, a badass, and an all-around nice and kind person. I'm talking about Marie Francois. Are you ready for question number 1 from Marie?
Oh my gosh. No, I'm not ready, but go.
All right. So her questions are kind of tame, so I'm going to spice them up a little bit. Her first question is, what did you do with the $25,000 you won at Uller Was a Girl contest, and what was your talent at the talent show?
Do you remember this contest?
I do. Was it a video edit contest? And then they picked who was like the queen of Uller for Whistler that week?
It was this event that Whistler Blackcomb put on called If Uller Was a Girl, and you had to get votes online first, and then you did like a culture talent show, something, and then there was a rail contest, and then there was a big mountain contest, and then I think those are the 4 things, and then the overall competitor won. It was snowboarding too, and then the prize purse was $25,000, and at this time the most I'd ever won at a contest I think was like $5,000 at the Gravity Games Rail Jam downtown Frisco, which was a big check at that time for a rail jam. But this was $25,000. I wasn't even taking it that seriously before because I was like, this is crazy. They're not really going to give us $25,000. Like, this is crazy. Like, what is this? But I ended up like, I'm going to go. I'm going to go to this contest and I'm going to do my best. And I ended up winning. And I sang a song in Chinese because I took a semester of Chinese at the U of U.
Can you sing that song in Chinese really quick for us, please?
It's kind of like this. Ni wen wo ai ni yo duo shan wo ai ni yo ji fen. So yeah, anyways, I did that. Yeah, and the music stopped. It's about singing to the moon, whatever. But I won this money, and I was just so blown away. I'm like, this isn't real. Like, this isn't my life. I can't just do what I like to do for fun and make a living out of this. It just was like going straight to my 20-year-old psyche. I was like, this is just crazy. I need to give this away because the more you give away, the more you get back. So I ended up giving away the whole prize purse away to different charities, Women's Sports Foundation, and also Stand Strong Again, which was an organization similar to like High Fives now that started back in the day to help people that had spinal cord injuries, because I had quite a few friends. My friend Lars Vane from back home in Lillehammer, he suffered a spinal cord injury that he's now in a wheelchair. Marc-Andre Bellevaux, from a cliff thing. So these are all top of mind. And I was just like, I can't believe I'm so lucky and I'm so healthy and doing these things. So yeah, I just gave all that money away.
All right. We're going to go into our second inappropriate question, and I'm going to give you the spin off of it right when I ask the question, because the question is very basic. What is your favorite type of music and why? But I'm going to spin that question into, have you ever been pulled on stage at a rap concert?
Yes. My favorite type of music is hip hop. And I was pulled on stage by Trina, the baddest bitch in Ogden, Utah. Huge crowd. Just kidding. There wasn't that many people there, but it was amazing. I got pulled on stage and she gave me my own microphone, and it was easily one of the best moments of my life. You
had a microphone rapping on stage with Trina?
With Trina. I have a photo too. I'll send it to you so you can post it.
Yeah, that is incredible. All right, let's go with your final inappropriate question, which is pretty basic, and I will change it again. Through all the years of traveling, what was some of the most hilarious, memorable moments for you? And then I will make that question, what is the dumbest thing you've seen a pro skier do while partying?
Wow. Marie and I got to travel a lot together because we were both on Oakley. So we did a lot of like catalog shoots and just random things together. The dumbest thing a pro skier did while drinking? There was this incident in Vail for a US Open. I remember two very alpha male skiers got in trouble there, and they were like pushed to the ground and stuff. And I remember one of them was like yelling at the cop obscenities about his daughter and different things like that. And I'm like, wow, these guys really think they are the shit. That kind of opened my mind where I was like, they're not that big of a deal. But yeah, I think the boys had some trouble with their anger, the skier boys, and like fighting and stuff, unfortunately. I was just so busy dancing. I didn't really see that much of it.
All right, well, we should get one of Marie's questions in there. So is there a funny, hilarious Marie Francois travel story that you have for us?
Oh, gosh. I'll say back to this like trip that we just went to Retallack, right? She is so amazing at like dressing up super ugly. She's so beautiful. And like every year she wins. She just can do all the things like the unibrow and just make herself look just disgusting. So Marie, I'm going to give her the award for being so silly and not taking life too seriously.
Well, I guess you did say that she can make herself look the most ugly. We'll leave it at that. That was Inappropriate Questions, and that is part 1 of our podcast, and I can't wait for part 2. You were part of that second wave of new school skiers, like I said, before the era of specialization, which means you did everything. You filmed, you competed, you partied, and most importantly, you had a good time, and that was what it was all about, it seemed like back then. Doing well was just icing on the cake, it seemed like. And I thank you for your time and look forward to our next time together.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
So that was part 1 with Grete, and I'm not going to lie, there were 7 more minutes of this podcast, and somehow I lost it. I thought I had a backup copy, but somehow I saved the wrong thing. And then when I went through all of my files, I couldn't find it at all. I was freaking out, but at least I have the first hour and 20 minutes of the podcast. And really, it's almost good that I lost that part, as that means that with part 2, we get to start out with a ton of wins and highlights and a lot of questions that I'll keep up my sleeve. So that was the start of a fun chat with one of the most confident people I think I've ever had on the podcast. Grete sure believes in herself, and it's noticeable, but not annoying. It's not like she's being cocky, just matter of fact, and there's something to be said for understanding and recognizing how good you are. Before we wrap this thing up, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to ask you to please support the incredible brands who make this show happen. They are Elon Skis, Puffin Drinkware, Best Day Brewing, Outdoor Research, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Stanley. Have a great week, everyone.